Welcome to Because the Beatles, the podcast about the Beatles, everything about the Beatles, 24/8. I'm Erica.
And I'm Allison. And before we start, be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, or stream us on Spotify and YouTube. If you're enjoying BC the Beatles, feel free to leave us a preferably 5-star review so other Beatle maniacs can find us.
And don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter/X, and TikTok too. We'll be posting videos, photos, and more from this episode and beyond. And you can also email us at bcthebeatles@gmail.com. Today, we are joined by Sam Wiles, host of the great Paul or Nothing podcast. He is maybe the only other Beatles podcast that I will cede my apologist seat to, because I think that he might love Paul even more than me. Maybe if that's possible.
That's crazy talk, but okay.
We're going to have so much fun today with this topic, and I think it's the perfect topic to bring you on for one hand clapping.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. It truly is an honor to be here in such hallowed halls. I was just scrolling through and I was like, oh, who were some of the last guests? So I was like, oh, okay, it's May Pang, Laurie Kay, Giles Martin, Michael Lindsay Hogg. Oh, and Sam Wiles at the end of that.
Hey, Sam Wiles.
That list has a nice ring to it. I'm very happy with that. I really am.
Well, we're very happy you're here. It's been a long time coming.
I've been a fan of this show, though, genuinely for so long. I remember during COVID, I listened to the All You Need Is Love Celebrating Pride episode, and I've been listening ever since then. The biopics episodes were really fun. The Doctor Who episode, obviously, with Ed Chen, I was definitely into that one. It's been a pleasure watching your show go from strength to strength lately. And in the wake of the herd being thinned, shall we say, in terms of big Beatle podcasts.
Yeah, God, crazy.
You're one of the big ones now. It's really exciting. It really is.
Oh, wow. Gosh, thank you. That's so kind of you. Wow. Damn, we need to hire you. We need to pay you more.
You can be our hype man.
Yeah, exactly.
Hype man.
Jeez. Yes. Well, before we get too in the weeds, and we are excited to talk about One Hand Clapping coming out this week. There's a lot going on in the Beatle world, a lot going on in the Beatle podcast world. There's a lot happening right now. So we want to take a second, just like talk about some hot topics. And one of the things that was on all of our minds last week was the passing of Tony Bramwell. Very sad, very instrumental part of the Beatles' inner circle from the early days in Liverpool. Tony, I think, in recent years, though, was known a lot for his Facebook presence and his Twitter presence and his prolific hosting and storytelling, shall we say. I was just telling Sam and Erica before we started recording, it was kind of widespread knowledge. It's like, oh, Tony posted. Let's see what tall tale he's telling this week. And it's unfortunate because he did love to embellish his role in the Beatles world. But I think if he had just told a straight story about his past and what he had accomplished and done, it would have been perfectly great. You know, I think he was there for a lot of, especially the early beginnings. And he was there for a lot of the moments you see him in photographs up through probably 1967 or so. So it's like he was there for a lot of the history. And it's unfortunate that he felt like he needed to embellish his story.
The Times of London posted an obituary that apparently took from what Tony said without verification, which is always an issue with a primary source, right? They say it, you think it's true because they're saying it. It's coming from their mouth. In this version, Tony's life is just fabulous. He was there from the moment John and Paul met. He organized the Paperback Writer Rain music videos. He helped organize the rooftop concert. He was at every pivotal moment. But was he?
One person who doesn't think he was, one person, I say that, but a lot of people don't. But one person who has spoken out in rebuttal to the Times obituary is Mark Lewisohn, who is also a bit of a hot topic in the Beatles podcast world right now. But we just wanted to quickly read his rebuttal, and you can go and find the Times obituary of Tony Bramwell, and this might make a little bit more sense. But you'll get some of the talking points of like what maybe was a little bit fabricated in the obituary. So this is what Mark says. And he also says that the Times does not want to publish this. So this is kind of becoming an email chain forward where we're all just passing it around and hopefully it lands in the right spot. So Mark says, further to your obituary of Tony Bramwell, I'm writing on behalf of those who can't or won't speak for themselves. If Tony organized the Beatles' Apple rooftop event, what did Michael Lindsay Hogg, Glenn Johns, and Mel Evans do? If Tony was the Beatles' roadie in the cavern, what did Neil Aspinall do? If Tony's mother knitted the Beatles' long black scarves, what did Astrid Kircher do? If Tony was put in charge of Brian Epstein's film company, what did Vivian Moynihan do? If Tony directed the Beatles' promos, 1965 through 1967, what did Joe McGrath, Michael Lindsay Hogg, and Peter Goldman do? If Tony ran Brian Epstein's Sunday concerts at the Savile Theatre, what did Vicky Wickham do? If Tony formed a company and persuaded Harry Saltzman to commission Paul McCartney to write the Live and Let Die theme, wild, what did Ron Cass do? Tony wasn't at Wilton Fate when John met Paul, he wasn't on the bus when they auditioned George, and he had nothing to do with Brian Epstein first seeing the Beatles, and so on and on. Mark says, I knew Tony for 37 years, and we enjoyed some laughs, especially over his Walter Mitty fantasies, which grew more wild and unlikely with every telling. Some people have the need to make stuff up, and while the Times is embedding it into history, I'm battling to ensure that history is told right. I like Tony and will remember him fondly. He had his place and played his part, but his obituaries are awash with nonsense. Mark Lewisohn.
Wow.
Mic drop.
It takes balls to rebut an obituary, especially this soon after somebody passed. I mean, that's a touchy subject.
For sure.
But if it was populated with that many fabrications, he really said what needed to be said.
It is probably the best ever example of well, you can't libel the dead. Well, this guy's he's just died and he's now coming out. Luckily, Lewison isn't going to be facing any legal repercussions here. Thankfully, he's also not surrounded by any controversy at the moment with his authenticity or anything like that.
No, not at all.
This whole Tony Bramwell thing kind of reminds me of the awful kind of commercialized nature of being one of these kind of Z-list Beatle celebrity kind of folks. And it is kind of unfortunate. And unless you're someone like, say, Lawrence Juba, who is A, still quite young, B, still quite handsome, and C, he plays music, he can gig at these conventions, like he has a steady stream of income. Whereas Tony Bramwell, outside of releasing a new book, the only source of quick cash he can get is by potentially fabricating a new Beatles story. And that's a sad state of affairs, really, but that's the media world we live in, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to say you were there for say the All You Need Is Love taping in Studio One at Abbey Road, which he was, and that's great. But it's another thing to say that you were in NEMS the day that Brian Epstein was like, who are these Beat Brothers? And he corrects him and directs him to the Cavern Club. I'm sorry. In no version of that story is that even remotely true. How the fuck would you be there for every single moment in the Beatles creation story? How are you the catalyst? That's not true, Tony. Bless you. Rest in peace, but my God.
And we have to point out, we did the math. When John met Paul, Tony Bramwell was 11 years old. He was not hanging out with John Lennon. He was not hanging out with Paul McCartney that day. That just didn't happen.
It checks out. I believe.
Okay, well, Sam is a Tony Bramwell truther. You heard it here first.
Love it. Love it.
He's buying what he's selling.
I could just hear in Lewison's voice, if Tony Bramwell sat on an amp, what did Yoko do?
Oh, God, if only he'd gone that far. I ate George's biscuit.
I know, right? If Tony Bramwell ate George's biscuit. That is funny.
I'm glad Mark did this. I mean, the fact that the Times won't print it as of the day we're recording is pretty crazy. Maybe they will in a day or two if this goes around to enough people. It's unfortunate for them that they took primary source material from Tony Bramwell, believed it without double checking it or verifying that it really happened, and then printed it. But good for Mark Lewisohn. There have been a lot of issues, at least among the podcast community, about whether he meshed together too many quotes to create an untrue narrative in certain places. I don't know. I kind of fall in the middle of this in that he wrote a giant book. He did a lot of work getting a lot of primary sources that nobody had ever spoken to before. That's an incredible amount of work and an incredible contribution to Beatles historiography. He's not an academic, and maybe he did a few things to make the narrative punch up a little bit. Okay.
Yeah.
Does he have a bias toward John over Paul? Well, certainly in the first book, But the Beatles story also has a bias of John over Paul in the beginning of the story. John was older. John was the leader of the band. Who knows if that will continue?
I think a lot of people who are complaining about this are people who have not read Lewison's book as well. Like, I think a lot of people, if they've read all of Tune In, they're going to pretty much be on Mark's side from the get-go anyway. You know, you will like his style and you'll kind of get where he's going with it. And I think the internet has brought this to a wider audience that might not even be as well versed in all of this, to put it politely. I think sort of a bit out of proportion.
I think if Mark made any faux pas in this argument, is that he kind of said, I'm the one who's going to tell. He didn't kind of say, he said, I'm the one who's going to tell the definitive story of the Beatles. That's not really possible. There are so many stories, including the ones that come out of Paul's mouth and Ringo's mouth.
And that goes back to, the primary sources not always being reliable in the case of retelling stories 50, 60 years later. Because, Paul and Ringo can be their own worst enemy when they tell stories that aren't entirely factual and can be disproven. I don't know. I try to remain a bit Lewison agnostic. I think because we've all had to temper our expectations, certainly for the next two books coming after Tune In, which have failed to materialize for a decade. But you guys are right. Like, he makes the Beatles story readable. I've read the 1,000-page whatever version of Tune In, and it kind of flies by because he tells the story in such a way that it's easy to understand. It's easy to picture it happening. If people expect him to write, like an academic paper, it's not that. And thank God it's not, because that would be just agonizing to read.
Yeah, definitely. I do believe that if anything like this is in the book, and I'm sure there is, it's 1,000 pages, that maybe there's a second edition where things are corrected. I don't think he did any of those things in bad faith. That's what I'm trying to say.
No.
I don't think he did. And we'll see if the John versus Paul narrative gets a little bit more tempered as the story matures a little bit if we see books 2 and 3.
Maybe this is a bit endemic of the whole Lewison hoarding information thing that some people had seem to have an issue with as well, like him kind of gatekeeping all of this information that should be spread amongst the proletariat. Maybe that's because like his editors and the people who fact check him might not have full access to all of the resources in the first place, so it doesn't get checked at the editing level. It could just simply be that.
It's quite possible. A book that big, maybe after a while, you just trust that the author knows what he's talking about if you're the editor. And
after page 200, just go for it, Mark. Just whatever. Yeah.
Off to the races. Yeah.
I think it's an interesting conversation overall because it's really showing the transition of this Beatles fandom from just a straight up fandom to an academic discipline. These kind of conversations go on all the time in academic circles. They usually don't make their way into Facebook pages and podcasts and things like that. So it's interesting how the Beatles historiography discipline is now kind of one foot in fandom and one foot in academia. And we're trying to figure out that balance.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, thankfully, I'll be helping figure out that balance because I'm actually going to be speaking at the 2nd annual Beatles Academic Symposium in Liverpool in July.
Oh.
So that is going to be an incredibly weird process for me. I basically, like, when I emailed them, when I'm not an academic, I'm not like a real person who should be here. I am willfully infiltrating you here. And they were so kind and they were so welcoming. And I get to talk for 10 minutes about Run Devil Run and its impact on Paul. So.
Oh my God, I'm so jealous.
That's so exciting.
That is awesome.
And loads of podcasting people are going to be there.
Well, say hi to our friend Christine Feldman Barrett. I'm pretty sure she's going to be there.
She's going. I think Ken Womack might be there.
Well, we expect a full multi-hour episode detailing your experience.
Yes.
3.5 hours. Yeah, me in a hotel room completely off my face, just recounting the day. Yeah.
I love that idea.
Didn't you do like 9 hours about Run Devil Run recently?
Yeah, about 10 hours on Driving Rain. Yeah.
One multi-hour episode about a 3-day conference is going to be like nothing.
Well, I've already done 3.5 hours on One Hand Clapping to bring it right back around.
Well, we're so glad that you have some more thoughts to share with us on One Hand Clapping.
I had to go back to the episode today because a lot of the versions of One Hand Clapping that we've been so used to like freely accessing on YouTube are now, they're all gone. Universal Music Group, MPL, they've all scanned it. They've all taken it down. So
I noticed that. There's one place where you can still find it online, just one.
Well, Let It Be was only available on Pornhub for so many years, wasn't it? So
Yep.
I know that's one of our favorite things to talk about because it's freaking hilarious.
I did search Pornhub for this.
You did? I can't imagine what came up when you searched one hand clapping.
It was not okay.
that little paper clip comes and goes, "Did you mean one hand fapping?" And it's like, and I'm done for the day, folks. I'm going. Thank you, everyone. Yeah.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Yeah, Sam, you've just reached your pinnacle of podcasting with that.
And we will get to one hand clapping in 1 minute. But first, we promised we would update you about the upcoming Sam Mendes Beatles biopics when there was news. And there might be news. This week, we got some unconfirmed rumors that every online magazine in the world is printing, that they have the 4 main Beatles cast members. So for John, we've got Harris Dickinson. He's not one that I'm familiar with, but the Stereogum article said, quote, "In his young career, Dickinson has shown a great real gift for playing doomed, sensitive dirtbags."
Perfect.
Okay.
That's amazing.
Paul Mescal. We had him on our list for Ringo, actually. Another article said he's known for being extremely hot and for playing intricate internal roles in things like All of Us Strangers and the Normal People miniseries.
Who wrote this? Who wrote this puff piece?
Paul Mescal wrote that, apparently.
Yeah. He's going to be in Gladiator 2, apparently. That's insane.
I'm most excited about him being in the Merrily We Roll Along movie, which is a Sondheim musical, which means the man can sing. Moving on. This is less confirmed than the others because he has disconfirmed the rumor, but Charlie Rowe is supposed to be George. He was the music publisher Ray Williams in the Elton John biopic Rocket Man, and he had a recurring role in the very, very excellent show Slow Horses with Gary Oldman.
Yeah. Forgot about Slow Horses.
He was quite good in it. Season 3, he's got a nice role. And then finally, rounding it out, Barry Keoghan as Ringo, which we had him on the list for John or Ringo.
We called that one.
Every picture they've got of this guy, it's so cruel. They seem to be implying that Barry Keoghan, he's got a big weird nose. He's going to be Ringo. And it's like, oh, come on.
Well, he's also got those blue eyes. Like, to me, it's the eyes that make him look most like Ringo.
I think it'll be an interesting choice. He and Paul Mescal seem to be the ones that are getting the hype. So we'll see.
Yeah.
All of these guys are between 27 and 31 years old. So let's hope they're not starting in 1957. But as long as they're starting in a decent time period, I think that they'll probably be looking age appropriate.
Yeah. And, you know, again, this is unconfirmed. So we don't know for sure if this is actually happening. But if I were a betting woman, I would say there's probably some truth to at least Paul Mescal and Barry Keoghan.
Yeah.
Because they're just so popular right now. They're really on the rise. So I could definitely see those two. I'm also liking that there are a couple more obscure names in there with the other 2 Beatles. So yeah, we'll see what happens.
We'll keep you updated as we know more and see if any of these rumors are true.
Yeah.
All righty. We are on to our feature, our super exciting feature, One Hand Clapping. All right.
You guys are in your glory. I can tell.
My God. It is so much fun. We haven't done a new Paul release, I don't think, since McCartney 3.
I know. It's been a while. It's so funny because I texted Erica earlier this week because I sort of had this moment where, you know, last week we talked to May Pang and she had her John sort of lost weekend experience in 74 and 75. And this is right in that pocket of 74, which may have been Paul's best year because that was when Band on the Run hit #1. You know, he's creatively working in Nashville right before One Hand Clapping. He does this incredible live in-studio record that has only been like mythologically bootlegged till now. He's really at the top of this game. And so it's interesting to juxtapose that between, you know, John and Paul in this period. So it's kind of apt that we're doing this back to back.
Paul was so on fire this year. He really was. Like, it's so good that he just decided to get something on film. Like, in terms of posterity, like, I'm so glad that he had this. I mean, we know that Paul, he was specifically talking about the Backyard Tapes when we were talking about this, but he likes to have things that aren't going to be released. And this is one of the prime examples of that. And it's been unavailable for 50 plus years. And it seems that coincidentally, about 2-3 years ago, 2 acetates were sold at auction, at Omega Auctions, and then no one knows where they went. And now a couple of years later, once Maltech has become commonplace, suddenly this appears. And it really is one of the great white whales of the McCartney fandom.
This is one of the most bootlegged recordings in all of rock history. It's so interesting that it took 50 years to finally get an official release.
Yeah.
We did get an official release of the film in 2010 when the Paul McCartney archive edition of Band on the Run came out.
Yeah, that very cheap, widely available release. Yes, that I'm not bitter about at all.
Yeah, everybody has 3 copies of that.
Yeah, you know, like how Egypt Station, there's like that $2,000 suitcase or some huge package.
So wild.
This was a DVD release that might have been only at the higher levels of product offerings for Band on the Run. I don't think a lot of people even knew that it was released as a film when that happened back in 2010.
And they've done well with this new set to price it right as well. It's about £40, $50, you know, a couple of discs, bonus EP as well. They've not tried to make it like an archive release, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, only one color? What?
That's unheard of with Paul stuff, you know, thinking back to McCartney 3, my goodness.
It is a weird release, though. I know certain McCartney fans are going to be a little irked that things like, you know, where's London Town? Where's Back to the Egg? Where's Rupert the Bear off the ground? This is like a real offering from the gods, really. No one asked for it, and yet here it is in the best clarity ever. And I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but despite a lot of this being previously available on archive releases, and if you're a Spotify person or Apple Music person, then all of them have been easily accessible on your phone for like 10 years. This is a one-hand clapping. This is the best way to listen to this new album, to this music. Absolutely blown away by this. Like, general thoughts, absolutely love this. This is such a good release.
Agreed.
There's something so magical about this one in that you have the energy of live Paul McCartney, and there's absolutely nothing like the energy of live Paul McCartney, coupled with modern day recording and mixing.
In preparation for this episode, I went back and listened to a lot of the mixes on the archive releases or, you know, on YouTube or wherever. YouTube, obviously, the fidelity is not good at all, but I have to agree with you, Sam. I think these sound the best by far compared to the other previous releases that we've gotten so far of some of these tracks.
There was also a lot of material when it was first announced, when you first click on that paulmccartney.com link, where I was like, okay, I didn't even know these were recorded that day, let alone not featured in the film. So there's so much content on this set that is just worth picking up for the sake of being a completionist. Me and Ken Michaels, we're very much those kind of people who, whenever an archive set comes out, you know, oh, the new Off the Ground archive set's been released, could not care less about the album tracks. Let's go straight to disc 2. What's the bonus stuff? And this album quite enjoyably mixes stuff that would be previously considered to be bonus content with kind of regular tracks. And I really liked that interplay, how you can go from Live and Let Die to Babyface. Like, what other album's going to do that, you know?
And that's so Paul, isn't it? A little background on one hand clapping. In August of 1974, Paul rented out Abbey Road Studios for about 4 to 5 days to record a live in-studio television special, possibly album, with his current lineup of Wings. Wings was riding super high. They were on their 7th week of straight number 1s for Band on the Run in the UK album charts, so they were big this summer. They just got in 2 new band members, like so recently. The lineup this time is Paul landed Denny plus Jimmy McCulloch on guitar and Jeff Britton on drums. Jimmy and Jeff were the new members. They replaced Henry McCulloch and Danny Sywell, who both left Wings right before they were meant to go record this at EMI in Lagos, Nigeria. Jeff's tenure in the band might be the shortest ever of the ever-revolving door that is the Wings lineup. He joined in May of 74, and he was replaced by Joe English by March of 75.
I feel so bad for Jeff. As someone who, at primary school, experienced what can only be described as bullying and exclusion, there's a certain air that I pick up on that they're all just slightly a bit too mean to Jeff. I mean, for no reason, Paul stops the take of Blue Moon of Kentucky just to point out that Jeff's giving him funny looks. I'm sure that if this came out before Jeff was expelled from the band, that would be a funny, quirky little moment. But, hindsight is what it is. And, the dramatic irony of it all just makes it feel a bit like,
Yeah.
In the actual one-hand clapping film, from memory, I haven't been able to watch a copy recently. Paul talks about how, I'm just really glad that we could get the whole band tightened together in a single unit. And he's about 4 minutes away from kicking out the band. So
you get the feeling that Jeff was just trying so hard. Like, he was awkward. He was wearing a karate gi for part of it and doing karate moves. He was doing some weird, awkward stuff. I think just trying to be like, this is who I am. And then everyone's like,
he's making himself a victim. What's he doing? Oh,
he just was trying. No. It was just so awkward. He was like, and I feel bad because I'm super awkward. So I understand that feeling of wanting to project something. But
he's a good drummer. He should have more swag. He's a great drummer.
He was. They were, I guess, nice to him when they left. There was an article put out that he was left to act and write the music for a karate movie. So I guess he was returning to his first love, which must have been martial arts.
He really loves martial arts.
And that became the Karate Kid.
Yeah.
He's the inspiration behind the Karate Kid. That's fact now, because I said it.
I can't think of any other references to martial arts in Paul McCartney's work. He's quite a peaceful man, except for freedom off driving rain.
Don't even start me on freedom.
We have a whole episode on freedom, folks.
Yeah, I have a whole diatribe on freedom. I can't. But back to happier days in the 70s with Wings. This was directed by David Litchfield. David Litchfield didn't direct anything else ever, as far as I could see.
Well, he would be a special effects guy for a lot of big movies.
Yes, he was a camera operator. He worked on Alien, Superman 4.
Aliens as well. What the? Who is this guy?
I don't know how Paul knew him or what the connection was, but it seems like he kind of just dropped into this thing and this thing didn't materialize. And that was, I guess, it for the directing. Did it kind of a fly on the wall cinema verite most of the time, except for a couple of interviews and voiceovers, awkwardly scattered throughout in different places, depending on which edit you watched.
It's very Paul, though, to have a complete random, I'm not going to say nobody because that's very mean, but just a complete randomer be the director. You'll have people like Jeff Wanfor. It's what has he done outside of Paul McCartney music videos? And it's not a lot, really. It's a bit like when Lennon talks about George Martin, what's he done besides the Beatles? It's one of them.
I'm just living for all of these different voices. You're nailing it, Sam. And I'm excited to get to George and Ringo at some point, even though they're not involved at all in this project.
I'm earning my keep here. I'm on the big podcast. I've got to sell myself.
I'm sold.
So the one-hand clapping film project was almost completed. They even made a print brochure to try and sell this thing to potential TV buyers, but then it just disappeared into thin air. Maybe that was because Jeff left, and that was weird after somebody's already been left for Karate Movie or got shit canned or whatever happened to him, that they didn't want to put out that lineup of Wings. Who knows? But unfortunately, it just got buried for a while.
Yeah, it is weird because it is a project that exists in the blank year for Wings, because obviously Band on the Run was released at the tail end of 73, so there is no major album release in 74. Venus and Mars is going to be in 75, so this would have plugged the gap nicely, but it's also in too close a proximity to a lot of other big stuff that's coming up. The loss of Jeff Britton is chicken feed compared to the scale of Wings Over America. Even now, it's a massive tour and a massive undertaking. And one of the questions I was asking, and I wanted to know what you guys thought about this as well, is with the amount of time it took fans to hear a live version of Soily or Denny doing Go Now, does one hand clapping not coming out work out better for Wings in the long run and help catapult Wings Over America, that album, into the stratosphere that it went?
I kind of wonder what kind of ripple effect this would have had it come out. I think about things in the 60s, like the Lennon McCartney TV special, which was great if you saw it, but if you didn't see it, then you had to wait 50 years till it gets bootlegged online, that kind of thing, or it hits YouTube. So it depends, I guess, on what the usage was going to be for this particular film.
That's the hard thing to conceptualize. And, now we would have like the Scylla movie on ITV. Like, how many times have we seen that?
Many.
But if it was 1974, it would have been on maybe once, maybe twice, if you got lucky to see it or had a way to get a bootleg.
Yeah.
Maybe comparing this to the James Paul McCartney special that was a year before.
There's a lot of crossover with it as well.
Yeah, a lot of the same songs.
It almost feels like he was spoiling the Wings Over America tour with this. Like, I love the 1973 UK tour era of the band. Not only do I get 2 Denny Laine songs back to back in the set list with Say You Don't Mind along with Go Now, but it's got that mixture of the band's getting tight. Linda's learning. She's pretty much becoming a full staple contributing member, not just keeping up, but it's still got some of that janky, rough, all over the placeness that makes early Wings very charming. And then you've got Wings Over America, and there's kind of a big gap, almost like that missing 36 years of Jesus's life, or the missing link in human evolution. And like Australopithecus, this has now appeared to kind of plug the gap. This is them getting tight with the 4th and 5th member, but that 5th member is going to be gone as well. So we're not quite there yet. And we're just getting to see that full transition with Wings. So like as like a historical artifact, this is incredibly valuable as an educational tool, regardless of whether like people like it, particularly as an album. Just for like Wings fans, this is such a plug in the gap of knowledge, I guess.
One thing that does make this really, really unique is that you have Wings, which is like this quintessential, mid-70s rock band at this time, performing with a full orchestra. That's kind of one of the things that really strikes me about this recording, and something that's really beautiful about this version that's officially come out now, because the sound is so lush and amazing. Obviously we're used to hearing like Live and Let Die. That was always with a full orchestra and the booming drums and that kind of thing. But with some of these other recordings, it's like, even if they were with a string section, you have this full brass and strings and woodwinds, really augmenting these songs in a great way that would only probably be possible in this setting, like a live show in this setting, in a studio like this, and in this environment.
I'll take any live Paul that they give me, especially from this era. Wings Over America is my favorite album, just like straight up, like of all time.
Of all time?
Of all time. Of all time.
I did not know that.
Even I think that's crazy. What a statement. How could I not be enthralled by such a statement continually?
Okay, so it's huge.
Size matters. You're right. Yeah.
It is very big. It is very big. Paul McCartney likes to keep it big. And it's got
oh my God,
so many of the classic Wings hits. It's done in this live environment with so much energy. Like, just think about the recording on that album of High, High, High. There are a couple of Paul McCartney vocals, and I think it starts with Long Tall Sally way back when. It makes me want to scream, like in the 1964 way. Like, it vibrates something in my brain that makes me so happy that Paul McCartney exists on this earth. And there are a lot of songs in Wings Over America that have that quality to me, that energy, that almost manic, like right on the legend manic, but not quite there. Just controlled enough to be like a good listening experience. And also there are some really great Beatles songs in there too. So we throw in a whole hodgepodge of great things. It's always been one of my, like, if you have a desert island album, it's one of mine. I love it.
The thing with Wings Over America, it does mirror a lot of what's going on in One Hand Clapping, in that you can tell McCartney's so excited to approach, especially the Band on the Run material. I didn't get to play this with a band live. It was me and Denny and Linda kind of putting it together piecemeal, and then we got it stolen, and then we had to do it all again, and then we had to go to Abbey Road and do the overdubs. So I've never actually got to play this. So this is probably one of Paul's first real opportunities to like do these songs, and that enthusiasm really comes through. But like what you see, especially with Wings Over America, is especially all of the Venus and Mars material. Like he'll do it all slightly differently, slightly quirkily, stuff that you'll never see over the next 30 years, Paul doing stuff differently just to be entertaining. And that's what I love so much about this album, because we get a slight transition from the Band on the Run stuff to this. Everything's got a bit more Linda in it. There's a lot more Moog or Moog in this. There's a lot more synth. The band sounds a lot bigger. We've got the orchestra in, so a lot of the sounds are a little more lush, a little fuller. There's a unique sound here that you really cannot get anywhere else.
The mixes here are really something special. They totally elevate this material. I don't think we mentioned the personnel yet. On the stereo version, which is what we're talking about today, all of the tracks, except for 2, were mixed by Steve Orchard. Steve Orchard is an engineer, mixer, and producer who works full-time for Paul McCartney, and they were mixed at Paul McCartney's personal recording studio, Hog Hill Mill. The 2 on the stereo album that weren't mixed by Steve Orchard are All of You and I'll Give You a Ring. Those are the original mixes by Jeff Emmerich from Abbey Road Studios. Giles Martin was involved in this as well. He worked alongside Steve Orchard to mix the Dolby Atmos version, which is available on digital release only. We're talking about the stereo version today, which is absolutely stellar. Steve Orchard is a master at taking those elements that embody the Wings sound and bringing them out in a totally new way.
If there's like a little knob that just has Linda written on it above, he's cranked that to full. And some of the songs like Band on the Run, where normally it might be, it's like they just crank her right to the top.
They sure
and
do.
It sounds so good. It's amazing.
I love it. Yeah, that's one of my favorite things about this whole thing. It's just, like the synths and all of that are just turned sky high, and it makes it so special.
It's the opposite of normal Linda, which is to be turned down, unfortunately.
So let's move into, because I know we all are chomping at the bit to talk about our favorite tracks, and we're kind of circling around that. Let's go there. So One Hand Clapping.
The title track, yeah. It's technically a new Paul McCartney song. I think that's really cool. I know Jeff Britton's definitely happy with that. He's got a new credit. What I thought was quite interesting about One Hand Clapping is that Wings are a band that aren't known or defined by having like a sound. They're known as being the McCartney backing band. And yet for me, this track, if you play this to anyone kind of well-versed in the general rock and roll malaise of the 1970s, they would recognize this as definitively Wings. There's something about Carney's bass, Linda's Moog, and then just other people on top of it that is so distinctively Wings that it was so exciting for me. I love a good Wings instrumental. Give me a bit of Zoo Gang, Proud Mum, Lunchbox on Socks. This is all of that. You get loads of goofy Linda on here. Brilliant way to start the album. I was very happy indeed. I think this has been called Jam on previous bootlegs, but now it's One Hand Clapping and it's absolutely awesome.
I just can't stop seeing the opening in my mind. The one hand clapping in the dark.
The literal one hand clapping.
A tree falling down in a forest, yeah.
No, there's a hand on the other side. It's just like magic of 70s editing. You don't see it.
We also get a version of Jet as well. Obviously, Jet is one of the most overplayed tracks in the Wings canon, especially in the general public. But for me, I was blown away by how much I enjoyed this version of Jet. There was so much going on here. There was a real energy and exuberance that is not on the album version. I don't want to say that it's the best version, because I think I'm going to say that about a lot of tracks on this album, that it's the best version of this song possible.
Well, I think that's also down to the remixes, because it sounds the freshest, because it's got the benefit of modern technology. Maybe that's why we like some of these songs so much on this particular release.
Yeah, Steve Orchard's mixes have a really similar vibe to like the way Giles works with the Beatles music.
And I know a lot of people have divisive opinions, but I think the way he freshens up tracks. Anybody freshen up?
I got it. I just did laugh.
Okay, great. Thank you. That was an uncomfortable silence. My God. Okay.
Oh,
Anyway,
oh my gosh,
I'm
so sorry.
Oh, been so long since we made fun of that tour. Oh, good times.
I know. Didn't we see that tour together, Erica? No, that was the one-on-one tour. Sorry, because I still have the shirt from it.
They all have almost exactly the same set list. I have a very hard time differentiating which one we're into.
I still have the freshen up socks though that you got me, I think, for Christmas one year.
Wow.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. You got me a flaming pie pot holder, and I got you freshen up socks, I think.
It's so good.
I think that was the tour that I saw him on as well, like 2018, something like that. Crazy story that day. Bit of an agoraphobic, hate heights. Get to the O2. I mean, I'm in the nosebleeds. I'm literally clinging to like the doors. I can't get to my seat. So my friend very kindly agrees to leave, but we have our beers with us. And janitor type came and went, you know, you're not allowed to leave with your beers. Look back, he's gone. He's gone. So we just sat there with our beers waiting.
It's a ghost.
Then someone else appears, another member of staff. This time he looks exactly like Jack Black. And he goes, have you checked the box office? And we go, no, we haven't. And we go to the box office, beers are nearly empty. Oh yeah, 2 people have left there right by the stage. On the last show of the Freshen Up tour, I'm about 20 feet away from Paul. Absolutely crazy.
Oh my God.
Paul did Wonderful Christmas Time. It was the last day of the tour. It was like December 22nd or something like that. Yeah. It's all on YouTube. I'm very grateful. I really am.
Oh my God, that is just amazing. And speaking of amazing, let's go back to One Hand Clapping and one of the standout tracks in this album, Solely.
I really want to start because I'm obsessed and I cannot stop listening to Solely. Like on this version of Solely is the best thing I've ever heard in my life. And I've literally been playing it on repeat for the past like 3 days. I can't stop listening to it.
So good.
It is so good. It like compared to the version that came out, you know, on the Venus and Mars archive and, you know, that we've heard before. This is it just sounds so rich. And it just, like you say, Erica, it captures that sort of manic energy of what it must have been like to hear it live when they did it around this time and the tours. It's, oh my God, I love it so much.
That track always stands out to me as feeling different from a lot of his other songs. It feels more hard. It's not classic Paul, and it's really cool because it's a pivot in a way for him.
I agree. It is so rockin'. I mean, it is right in the vein of like a rock show and, you know, like I'm sure what it was like to hear Live and Let Die live or 1985, but it is a little bit harder. It's like a harder edge than that.
This song is one of the great casualties of this not having originally come out in 74. I don't think there's a McCartney deep cut fan alive who doesn't wish that Solely wasn't more prolific in the public zeitgeist, as it were, especially this recording. Ever since I've been a McCartney fan, I've heard people going, oh, I really wish there was a decent studio recording of this song because it's just an Easter egg for the live fans. We have it. It was there all along, and it is one of the best things Wings ever put to tape. It's almost weird or gauche to say that like Paul is rocking hard, like unironically and unabashedly and unashamedly, but that is what's happening here. You are right. It is slightly different. There is a weird edge to this that a lot of his rockers don't have. And if anything, this version of Soily is so good that it makes something like Junior's Farm seem 10% more tepid than it might otherwise if it wasn't included.
Even Jet, which precedes it on this set, Jet is usually a hard rocker. He goes hard on it every time, but then he hits Soily and it's like, oh my God, okay, he just turned it up like 6 notches.
Yeah, it's like he took his Monkberry Moon Delight voice and put it in a hard rocker, which you don't really usually hear that combination. And so it's just mind-blowing.
It's also weird that it's the 3rd track because for the previous tour, it was the opening song. And then for the next tour, it's going to be the closing track. But it works as a good McCartney opener because it's got that line, people all together here tonight. And
yeah, it's so good.
But then he had to go and write sitting in the stand. And then he did a sports arena tour. And suddenly other things made sense. So one of the great casualties, Soily, is in the McCartney narrative.
I don't understand why he didn't choose to put it on some album. It would have been a hit on any album, you know, and he certainly resurrects things from 10 years ago and he puts them on albums. So I know he released it on the B-side of Maybe I'm Amazed, the live reshoot, but I wonder why he never put it on the album. on any album.
It definitely could have gone on the Red River Speedway double version. Again, another casualty. It just keeps getting slapped around, unfortunately.
Next on the list, we've got the Sea Moon / Little Woman Love medley. I like this. I like the guitar part. This is one of those ones where you hear it in the mix and you hear it in your headphones. And if you hear the guitar in your right side and it's different than you're used to hearing, and it's very cool. And then Linda's harmonies, again, turned up to 11.
I was waiting intentionally there just so something else nice could be said.
Feel free to roast.
No, I've got something else nice to say. Less Jamaican flavor, which is always good when he doesn't do the Jamaican thing.
Because that's like cancel territory these days.
Mhm.
And they stuck the New Orleans voice at the start of Listen to What the Man Said, which is not in the version that's on Wingspan, rather notoriously. All right. We're in New Orleans. It's like, oh, no, Paul, please. Please, no more.
You don't need to do it.
I'm a little done with Sea Moon. Putting Little Woman Love on the end of it is one of the only ways she really get me to listen to the full thing. When you get to like that verse where it goes, Sea Moon, that I think should be brought forward a whole cycle further. I think the song kind of runs out of steam a little quicker than Paul thinks it does. Fortunately, though, they swap things around a bit by not going back to Sea Moon. Like normally it's Sea Moon, Little Woman Love, then Sea Moon again, as on the previous tour. But for this one, they just do Sea Moon, Little Woman Love. And I'm not totally convinced that it's not a goof that they just rolled with and decided that it sounded good.
Yeah, that's possible.
Paul liked Sea Moon a lot more than a lot of people like Sea Moon.
Paul loves it. It's stayed in set list for so long.
That's one of those things. Oh, Sea Moon. It's like the opposite of L7. That's like super clever. Okay, I'm going to say that forever.
I'll never get it. And I'll never try to get it. Oh,
the L7?
No, like I get it, but it's just I don't know what he's saying with that. It's very like a 60s piece of love, cool man, whatever. Don't worry too much about it, kind of love.
That's him being a reggae Bob Dylan, putting a bunch of nonsense together and calling it a song.
Oh no, what's that thing he says in Two of Us? By the chords.
The chords.
Yeah.
The chords. One of the most iconic moments of cinema.
I told you there'd be an in-joke.
Yes, you did it.
You've quoted Two of Us, so you've passed the audition, Sam.
Moving on to a pair of songs that are often related in people's minds. Maybe I'm Amazed and My Love, both big tribute songs to Linda. Neither of them are my favorite.
No, I thought My Love was super boring. I was like sort of ticking down the time till it was over on this release.
Oh, you're saying all the right things, everyone.
I am such a fan of the live version that's always played on the radio.
From Wings Over America, the greatest album of all time.
Best version of Maybe I'm Amazed.
No, the best version is the album version. Come on.
Okay, now you're just being argumentative, Sam Wiles.
He hasn't played it correctly since the day he recorded the album version. He's performed it incorrectly ever since, and I will die on that hill.
Says you. Okay.
When you're Paul McCartney, can you play your own song incorrectly? Can you?
You've heard him do I've Just Seen a Face on Wings Over America. He plays it wrong on that album. He plays it wrong.
He's just evolving the songs, people. He's taking it into the 70s.
I mean, a cowboy whoop isn't supposed to be at the end of that song?
I'm just trying to trigger Erica at this point. I really am.
Can't trigger me. Can't do it. Now we're moving into something where, hell yeah, fucking hell yeah, Bluebird.
Oh.
Okay, did anybody else feel like it sounded like a 70s porn?
Oh my God.
There was just the way they did some of that, the instrumentation that was a little like, wow, chicka, wow. So fun.
I didn't, but now I have to go back and listen to it.
It was so fun. I felt like I needed to arrange a key party or something when I was listening to it. Put me in the essence of the 70s.
I mean, anything could happen. Like the last time we heard Bluebird, it was very stripped back on the underdub mix that we got earlier this year, which didn't feature Howie Casey at all. So I think any extra sexy sax from Howie is just going to be very evocative. So we're all probably very powerless to that in this mix. It's very well done.
Moving on to a couple of lesser known songs. First, Let's Love, a snippet of a song that Paul wrote for Peggy Lee.
I thought the most interesting thing about this kind of medley here with Let's Love All of You into the next track, which is I'll Give You a Ring, is there's a missing song here of this medley. It usually starts with Suicide, which, you can find the full medley on YouTube, but I actually like Suicide. So and it does fit in well with this group of songs.
Not in 2024.
I guess you can't put a song called Suicide on this in 2024.
You can barely even say that on YouTube. That's why people say things like they made themselves unalived.
Unalived. Should we call this the Unalived? The song Unalived? So we don't get stricken down?
I call it
They call it unalive. Do, 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 do. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I was so shocked with this song because, so when I think back to my original viewings of One Hand Clapping, I remember the audio of Paul saying, so I went to dinner with Peggy Lee, but rather than taking her a bottle of wine, I took her a song. And then it goes into, you look a little lonely. And he goes into, I'll Give You a Ring. Now, I don't know whether that was an incorrect kind of Bernstein Bears Mandela effect, incorrect memory, or if they edited two different things together. But I didn't know that this went on to Peggy Lee at all. And this reminds me of the time I was doing one of my Cold Cuts episode and I reviewed Goodbye, and I didn't know that Mary Hopkins did a cover of it, and I got so many emails shouting at me about it. I don't still think about it. But Let's Love's pretty good. It's a nice little curio. I don't think it's as good as it thinks it is. I prefer the next track, 100%.
All of you.
We all love a McCartney song where he can bring it back 50 years later. I mean, we all think of Fishy Matters Underwater becoming Frank Sinatra's Party on Egypt Station, or like him bringing Mama's Little Girl all the way forward to the Put It There maxi 12-inch single in 1989, maybe 90. This is one of those songs where I feel like if he did the McCartney 3 bonus tracks and one of them was called All of You, it would be totally fine. It could be on his next album and people will be totally happy with it. The melody's done. It's not like I'll Give You a Ring where it needs those updated lyrics and it needs a George Martin to go, Paul, I don't think it's quite done yet. All of You is a Paul McCartney classic ready to go, and it just didn't happen.
Yeah, that's funny you say that because I felt the opposite about it. I felt like it felt more unfinished than some of the other songs. Like it kind of just ended bluntly, and I don't know if he ever wrote more of it, but I don't know. Something about it felt a bit unfinished. Maybe because it wasn't orchestrated in the same way that some of these other songs were.
My gosh, such a clash already. No, I must defend myself here.
I love just watching you guys go at it. This is awesome.
Okay, let me pop off. All right, let's start. Let's
do it.
Okay. No, for me, this is one of those ones that Paul could literally just take to Mark Ronson and just go, yeah, let's just do this one. It would be good to go. It would be good to go. I really do think that. And it's funny because the next song wasn't good to go. I'll Give You a Ring. It's a rudimentary version of the song. It's not complete. And it would take him taking it to George Martin in the early 80s to finish it off, and it would become the B-side to the Take It Away single. And I don't know about you two, bet £5 that Erica did this as well. When I listened to this version, I was adding all of the little George Martin flourishes, the guitar licks, the backing vocals that would have been.
I went back to the original right after hearing this the first time just to be like, I gotta put in the rest. It's a totally different song, the way he does it. It sounds like Paul McCartney in a saloon in this, the way he's kind of banging on the piano. And it's, missing a little orchestration. I thought it was cool. I liked it.
I actually kind of preferred this version to the Tug of War version. Yeah. I don't know. There's something more pure about it. I felt like in Tug of War, I don't know. I sort of sometimes feel like he's just singing into an echo chamber. So I really enjoyed just the pureness of his voice, the piano, the kind of stripped back version in a lot of ways. I don't know. I like this version over Tug of War.
Anything in the 80s is going to have something weird on top of it.
Yeah, but this version doesn't have the key pun that makes the song work, because he's giving her a ring as well in the third verse of the final 80s version. And I think that is what completes the song and gives it that little bit of zhuzh that makes it a McCartney classic for me.
It's speculated that the backing track, though, for the Tug of War version was actually done around this time and then brought forward.
During the McGear sessions, yes.
Yes, because they had the same clarinet player on both of those, so they figured that might have been done at the same time.
You guys are so funny. This is like the best. I mean, I love Paul, but I love how in the weeds, like two McCartney nerds get into this. This is awesome.
Yeah, finding the same kind of nerd as usual is a nice moment.
This is why we are good compliments for our podcast, because, you know, we get in the weeds on different things.
We did. We balance it out.
Oh, just wait till I tell you about the Beatles in the Philippines.
Oh, I cannot wait.
The long lost episode of BC the Beatles that we're going to get in July. Just you wait, listeners. We're going to learn all about the Filipino government.
It's like our cold cuts. Will it ever actually come out?
It is our cold cuts.
And there's going to be a movie about that soon as well, isn't there? Like a specific film about the Beatles in the Philippines. It's a Filipino production that's going to be out like next year or something.
Next up on our track list is Band on the Run.
You can tell they're eager to do this material. There's loads of Linda on this. Pretty good. What was more interesting to me was the next track, Live and Let Die. I'm someone who is kind of done with the overplayed McCartney tunes, so it takes a lot to get me excited about them.
Yep, same.
And this might be a bit of a wild hot take. This may be the very best recording of Live and Let Die that exists in the world. This is the best version. I'm sorry, George Martin's not involved at all, but the fact that we have Mr. Del Newman conducting this orchestra, giving it an extra few BPM, a crucial few beats per minute, a slight quickening, hate to use the most cliche phrase ever, it takes the song to the next level.
It does. I would agree. Yeah, the pace of the orchestra, it's just so dramatic. For those of us who have seen Paul, obviously it's like I can see the bombs going off,
right,
like the fireworks, you know, like with this version and the fire and the excitement, you know, this version really channels that.
It was good enough that I didn't get annoyed at the grammatical choice in the first verse.
Oh my God, I still do.
What bothers me in that song, I hate it so much. In which we live in.
In which we live.
To quote Paul during the press to play sessions, he's talking to Hugh Padgham. Hugh Padgham has questioned him on something, and according to law, Paul goes, "Excuse me, did you write yesterday?" You know, it's one of those moments. It's one of those.
I mean, it's only it's that, and then in My Love, of course, My Love does it good. I can't deal with it. I can't cope.
I have a friend called Morris who hates the line from "I'm Carrying," which is "I'm carrying something." It's like it's one of the biggest letdowns ever. But then I realized, oh wait, Linda was carrying James, so maybe it's not the worst lyric ever. So
okay.
The next track's a big one though. This is a big fan favorite. This is one that people who don't know about one hand clapping, who don't know about Band on the Run archive editions know and love, which is the one hand clapping version of 1985. And as someone who wasn't able to pick up the lucrative Band on the Run archive edition, nor its even more lucrative current 2024 eBay price, the fact that I've now got the opportunity to buy a vinyl copy of this version of 1985 is something that I am very happy with indeed. It's the best, again, the best version of the song out there. The only thing that I thought was a bit odd is that they removed the Band on the Run coda at the end, which is just part of the song for me.
I know, I was so expecting it.
I guess it makes it feel more live. Like it's a live recording, because they wouldn't do that. I don't know.
That's different. It's different. It's not.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I've played it so much that even though objectively, with my critics hat on, this is the standout of this album, it is the GOAT. It is one of the best things Paul McCartney's ever done. It's one of his most iconic and staple reinventions of his own material. I've listened to it so much that there are other things on some that I am more excited for, despite objective truth, I guess is the best way to put it. And it's some of the only footage in the film of Paul with a mic, not playing an instrument. You never fucking see that
It's
ever.
true. You
never see
don't.
Paul just going, yeah. And obviously, it's all like overdubs and stuff like that. But the idea that he gets up off the piano and there's no bass is really exciting and unique for any McCartney fan, actually.
Yeah, you wonder if he'd know what to do with his hands, but he's just fine.
He figures it out.
He gets his hands busy for the next one because it's another fan favorite.
Oh, my
another one that
goodness.
is a big, oh my God. If you're a Paul McCartney fan and you don't like Babyface and you don't think that it's the perfect version of the song and better than any other version that anyone else has ever done ever, I really do not have any time for you whatsoever. I will die on that hill. It's hard to put into words. It really is. This is one of the best McCartney recordings there is. I could put this in a top 25 McCartney of all time ever. I love the false start. Any Beatle fan loves a false start. Any fan of I'm Looking Through You loves a good false start to a song. And what I love about this is the implication that the rest of the band cannot even come into existence, cannot apparate until Paul gets the chords right. It's like his dun, 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 baby face. Nothing happens. But then he goes, dun, 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 baby face. Life spawns. There is this generation of magic that just explodes, and it is so exciting and infectious. I cannot stop listening to it. And again, I'm so happy on, June 14th, I'm going to get a vinyl copy of this forever. I can play it as many times as I want. If there is a nuclear apocalypse, I will have a physical version that will last like the Book of Eli. I will carry it forever. Future generations will have access to Baby.
And you questioned me saying Wings Over America was the greatest album of all time, and you just gave me that diatribe about Babyface.
It's so good.
Love it.
It's so good.
He's making Jim Mack proud,
He is. I mean, I love this shit. He starts going on the granny music. It makes me so happy. We just put our podcast on YouTube a couple of months ago, and I try to never look at the comments because it's YouTube. But once I ended up seeing one, and there was some actually dude who was trying to correct me on something. And I only saw, Miss Kisses on the bottom, blah, 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 blah.
Oh, shit.
And I'm like, thank you. You just gave me my burlesque name. I love it. So yes, you can call me Miss Kisses on the
hilarious.
bottom. I love all this Tin Pan Alley, old-time musical theater stuff when he does it.
You are safe on this episode. I'm a straight white man. We are immune from criticism of any kind. We're all good. You can.
That's the
I've
problem.
noticed.
That's what this podcast needed. More straight white men
More straight
explain
white
to
men.
women.
We needed that energy. Yeah.
That is the thing. That is the missing link. The straight white man.
This episode is going to be so popular on YouTube.
Yeah. Same with another kind of minds. Yeah. Shout out to Phoebe. Who would have thought that a version of Let Me Roll It with orchestra is what I needed this year? I was very happy to hear this one. It really highlighted how little of the Band on the Run archive edition that I hadn't listened to. For me, this was new, and it's been out for 10, 12 years, something like that. It is interesting how he didn't put this version in Wings Over America. It seems that the addition of the strings makes it a little too lush, a little too full. And I think the magic of Let Me Roll It is in its sparse arrangement, it's in those silences. And just that half second of nothing is so powerful. But having the constantly in the background takes a little bit away from it. And I'm not surprised why this didn't go on. But as a curio, as a McCartney fan, to have at my fingertips in milliseconds, very happy to have it.
I always thought of Let Me Roll It as a guitar song, especially because if he does it live, he segues into Foxy Lady, and he's just going fucking nuts. It's not one of my favorite songs, but I'm happy to see anything that has a little more orchestration. We're kind of getting into the part of the album that is where the most interest and the most bootlegable kind of stuff is starting to happen. It's very cool. We start with Blue Moon of Kentucky.
It's the best thing on the album, Erica. It's the best thing on the album.
You said that about like 6 different tracks, Sam. We get it. You love it. You're going to buy 2 copies so you can take them on your ark like Noah and repopulate the planet.
Well, normally I do buy 2 copies, but that's because I end up like panicking, and I think like I get like either a little bit too drunk or something like that, and I end up buying a copy on eBay, a copy on Amazon, a copy on Paul McCartney's website. I've got 2 copies of the Band on the Run set. I've got 2 copies of this. I thought like NPL had sent me a copy because I'm so famous and well known. Not the case at all. I was just so inebriated that I bought 2 copies. I definitely have only bought 1 copy of One Hand Clapping.
If you buy 2 copies of One Hand Clapping, do you have 2 hands clapping?
Wow.
You just have clapping, I believe.
We've solved the riddle.
Blue Moon of Kentucky, though, it's been an Easter egg for McCartney fans, a bit like Soy Leaf for quite a while. And to have an official version makes me very happy indeed. So much so that I've learned it on guitar, and I'm going to be playing it at my open mic tomorrow.
Oh, we better film that for us.
I already way ahead of you. I've spoken to a friend. He's got space on his phone. I'll send it over. Can't wait to embarrass myself. Really can't.
Excellent. I'm excited. Okay, moving on to a song that I've never heard in live environment before. Never thought I would. Power Cut. Fun to hear. Is he doing a Lawrence Welk impression?
It sounded like Lawrence Welk to me in the beginning, but maybe not.
As someone who adores the Redrush Speedway medley, unironically, I was so excited to see this as part of the track list. And then my eyes went and scanned 2 millimeters to the right, and I saw that it was 1 minute 33. I'm like, well, that doesn't track at all. And I wasn't expecting him to do like the whole like bam, 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 like doing like Lazy Dynamite and all of that. But I was expecting a little bit more than this. It's one of those tracks that typifies something that we're going to see later on this album, where I kind of hope and assume that it's going to be a Wings full band arrangement, and it's just Paul on piano. And that's kind of what I wanted here. And I feel so selfish and unappreciative for complaining that there's a solo version of Paul doing Power Cut, which never existed before. Like, fans would be so desperate to have this. Luca Perazzi would be so happy to have this. And yet I feel like us a little bit more, unfortunately. It's both a high point and a low point simultaneously, so completely average.
Well, that's kind of the magic of Paul. Some of the greatest Paul moments come around when he's just sort of fucking around on the piano. But the rest of that time, he's just fucking around on the piano. So kind of got to wait for it.
I could sit and watch Paul play piano all day.
Oh, Ringo.
Oh, Ringo.
Next is Love My Baby, which we saw about 10 years ago as a special download on Paul's website. I don't know if it's been anywhere else.
Was it that song? Was it that weird, only available as a download on McCartney's website track? So mad.
Yeah, it was. It's so strange. What a weird choice.
It is like one of the best cold cuts. I've always loved this song. It's got that kind of glissando, glossy fairy tale. It could always be on like a mobile for like young James spinning a bow in.
Aw, yeah, that's cute.
Then we get into a very strange part of the album, which is Paul starting to do Beatles songs.
The Beatles part.
And he was so weird about doing Beatles songs at this point in his career. He didn't want to do it. He didn't want to be associated with it. And he seems uncomfortable playing Let It Be.
My comment about Let It Be on this was just sweet Jesus, because it was just like a send up, of Let It Be. It was really like disturbing. It was like an eerie version. And he just obviously, I think, was trying to distill the awkwardness maybe of playing the song. And, this comes 5 years after he's recording Let It Be in that same space.
It's the same space.
Yeah, it's Studio 2.
Studio 2, Abbey Road.
Oh, no.
Well, okay, to be fair, they recorded Let It Be in the basement of the Apple building, but I'm sure there was some work that went on in Studio 2. Nobody Come For Me. But regardless, it was only 5 years after that was recorded. So it was still kind of fresh in Paul's Beatles purview.
That was the thing about Wings Over America. Oh, Paul's going to actually perform Beatles songs. Oh my God, like Paul never performs Beatles songs. So this was sort of his introduction, like dipping his toes in the Beatles water again after a number of years of trying to shy away from the Beatle Paul image. And I'm glad he practiced a little because he was uncomfortable.
To me, Paul was looking ahead. He knew about podcasting. He knew that podcasters would need content to talk about. And for me, this is him going, right, well, I've got to do Beatles songs, but I'm going to do them all completely differently and uniquely just to make it interesting for people to talk about. Because we've got Let It Be done on like accordion, and then we get The Long and Winding Road. That's another song that I really that much at all either. Rather like a Sea Moon putting Little Woman Love. Oh, okay, we'll have Long and Winding Road with Lady Madonna. So with both of these tracks, it seems like he's trying to zhuzh up these old Beatles songs and get through them as quickly as possible, like it's some sort of contractual obligation.
He's trying it out. He's trying to feel like, what does it mean to perform Beatles songs as Paul, a member of Wings, as opposed to the Beatle Paul?
Next up are two songs that are brand new to the band because they had just recorded Junior's Farm in Nashville the month before One Hand Clapping, and Sally G, which was written and recorded in Nashville at the same time and was the B-side to Junior's Farm. Junior's Farm sounded like album quality. It was really, really good.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
I love the little Sally G too.
I love Sally G.
A little ode to Nashville, you know?
Yeah. And I like this that he's doing kind of an ode to Americana without it being like super silly.
Yeah, he takes his Americana seriously.
I remember in the wake of Denny Laine's death that I said that Send Me the Heart, the unreleased Denny Laine song that was recorded in that period, was better than Sally G. But it took me until hearing this recording specifically that I realised that maybe I was slightly hasty there. Sally G, what a gorgeous little ditty from Paul. I always love a song that you don't like for years and then suddenly a neuron fires in your brain and you suddenly get it. Paul definitely plays the long game in that sense, and Sally G is just another example of that. Talking of the long game, though, Paul always spoke of Tomorrow as a song that he felt was unfinished. He talks of Linda's dad saying, you should do it again, you've thrown it away, and it deserves a remaking. And so when I saw that there was a 2:12 version of Tomorrow on One Hand Clapping, I was very excited. Again, a bit like Power Cut, and also like Power Cut, a bit let down. I don't like this barroom crooner version of Tomorrow. I think it falls entirely flat. It exists as a curio on the track listing for me.
I like this one better than the original because of that cabaret feeling.
Well, the next track is one of my highlights because I love the British Invasion, and I love the Moody Blues. And we have Denny on probably the most well-known Moody Blues song, which is Go Now. And a song that Denny performed not only during this period, but throughout his career, throughout his whole life. I was lucky enough to see Denny perform it many times, and it was always great.
Oh,
yeah. So that was wonderful to see it included here. It's kind of an interesting inclusion in a Wings sort of TV special that they would include a Denny Laine Moody Blues song, but it was beautifully mixed. I thought this version is just a treasure.
the harmonies were so loud compared to Denny. Like they were almost equal to Denny's lead, and it was so fun. Like it almost gave a wall of sound, like a mini wall of sound, just with the power of the voices and the instrumentation. It was so great.
I am so happy with this version. For the longest time, I've been having to put up with the fact that maybe the version from Japanese Tears is my favorite version of Go Now. But now we've got this, and it is everything I would want from a Denny Laine interpretation of Go Now. It's so full, so fully realized. It doesn't have that kind of tinny awkwardness of that original recording. It doesn't have the kind of scratchy graininess of the Japanese Tears recording. So again, without any irony, this is the best recording of this particular song, and I'm so glad Denny gets another highlight. It'd be nice if it was an original of his. I do feel like he's kind of like Sisyphus pushing that boulder up the hill every day. Denny Laine is forced to play Go Now constantly over and over until he atones for his mortal sins. But yeah, a very good version of the song.
And in the end, half of the articles used it in his obituary and some not so clever line too.
Oh,
Followed
God.
him all the way.
That's so true.
It was so disappointing.
Lazy journalism.
Go Now.
Yeah, that was great.
Yes.
And
there was some version of it.
bad stuff. Next up is Wildlife. I was surprised to see Wildlife. I'm always surprised to see almost anything from Wildlife show up again. I like this version more than the original. It was kind of soulful. He was really banging it out with his voice, and there was more to it, I thought, than there was in the Wildlife version, the original version.
This version was a bit of a letdown for me. I'm awfully sorry to say. I'm someone who did not buy the Wildlife Red Roof Speedway big box set that contained the Wings Over Europe disc. That is a very lucrative, very exclusive piece of McCartney memorabilia. It's not been made fully available. There's no streaming version of it. But you can go to, say, something like the Bruce McMahon show, where you get the version of Wildlife with that coda, with the and that is some of the most sublime, satisfying third eye wing material there is. Like, it just connects with my soul in a very specific way. And this version does do a very good job of it. Yeah. There's something about their version of the coda at the end of this that feels rushed. It feels like they missed the timing slightly. I wish they would have redone it. The Bruce McMahon show version of Wildlife remains the king for me, unfortunately.
That's all right.
What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that?
As somebody very famous once said, what's wrong with that?
Something's going to be bad on this album. There's always going to be good with bad. This just happens to be what I consider to be the lesser material. A little bit like the next track. I don't think there's too much to talk about here. It's just another version of Hi, Hi, Hi. I like the song. It's a bit overplayed, but hey, the gang do it well here. Jimmy and Jeff do it well.
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, nothing for me is going to compare to the version of Hi, Hi, Hi from Wings Over America. It's just perfect to me. This is a nice version. They do it really well. The harmony is really smooth. But I don't know what you have to do to top the Wings Over America version.
Of course you'd say that.
Yes, my favorite album. Allison, what did she think?
I thought it was an interesting choice to end on. Hi, Hi, Hi. I may have put it earlier in the track listing, but definitely going out on a high note.
A high, high, high note.
I thought it was great. I would agree with you. I think the Wings Over America version is better. But yeah, I mean, it was great. It was a nice cap on it. Let's put it that way.
I'll always appreciate hearing that song. I love how delightfully dirty yet totally nonsensical the lyrics are. It just makes me smile.
Hey, I know. Every time I hear it, it just reminds me of being like a 12-year-old hearing it and being like, hee hee hee. Like, yeah. he said, like, lie in the bed, ha ha ha,
He said body gun.
It's a polygon, and it is.
Oh, I know. But when you're 12, it sounds like body gun, and you're like, hee hee.
It still sounds like body gun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. It's
sweet banana.
Every time I hear it, I'm taken back to like being just a kid who is just delighted in the secret dirtiness of it all.
Well, that brings us to the end of the album proper. Some of the versions also have a 7-inch disc with some extra tracks on it, tracks that were known to bootleggers as the backyard tapes. These are the things I think that a lot of people were most excited about as far as what is the material we're going to see. This was, I believe, the last day of filming at Abbey Road for this thing. And Paul was like, I just want to go outside and play outside. And he went into some small backyard area where there was only enough space for him and his guitar and the director. So everyone else stayed inside. And it became a Paul McCartney solo joint, as it were. And he played this little medley of songs that has been passed around for 50 odd years now as the backyard tape. This starts with a song called Blackpool.
Oh my gosh. why is this song not longer? Why are more towns not named? Why does he not drag it on for longer? Why is it just Blackpool and Southport? Why do we only get these 3 measurements? Come on, Paul. You could have dragged us on for 6-7 minutes, Birmingham, 43, 22, 43, Birmingham. And we would have listened to it. Come on. This is such a tease. It really is.
Paul actually answered this. I found a quote about the song. He said, when Lyndon and I first got together, we used to groove around a lot, and I had a number of songs which I would just sing, but not really record. They were mess around songs, and this was one of them. So he thought of this as a throwaway song that he didn't really put much stock in.
He's played it twice since, though. It's you can hear an outtake on the Chaos and Creation at Abbey Road session. And then weirdly, he did it on the Ronnie Wood show in 2012 as well. So it's definitely stayed with Paul.
That's random.
It's not the only other random thing from the Backyard tapes. There are a few tracks that didn't make it onto this little EP. There's a couple of other Elvis numbers that he does as well. But there's also a bit of just noodling he does, Listening to Paul noodle on the acoustic is like watching him play on piano. You can do it for hours. But there's this little bit where he'll just go boom, 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 boom. And in 1974, during the Backyard tapes, during One Hand Clapping, he plays Great Day. It's the exact same riff. It's the exact same notes for Great Day.
Wow.
And that's quite poignant for me because Paul would record Great Day on September 3rd, 1992, which was also the day that a certain Paul McCartney host was born. So...
Oh, wow. Okay.
It was a great day. It was a great day.
It was a great day. And he also recorded When Winter Comes that day, which was also off McCartney 3 as well. So, yeah, feel very close to Paul on that day, indeed.
That's lovely. And he had it in his head for just a while. You were not even a glint in your father's eye when he first started noodling around with Great Day.
There's so much of this performance in the Backyard tapes that's clearly stuff that he's been practicing, which is quite funny to pick up from Paul. Like there's a bit of him clearly going like, okay, I'm going to be doing something here. And clearly with Blackbird, he's been practicing Blackbird a lot more than other songs. There were actually 3 other versions of Blackbird that he did before this, but the cameraman didn't have the tape right, or Paul kind of messed it up slightly. And so the version we get is Blackbird number 4. But if you go on YouTube, oddly enough, the whole Backyard tape is still available on YouTube, unedited. MPL's not taking it down. And you can hear those first 3 takes, and the accuracy and the precision and the similarity between those 4 takes is shocking. He's not a normal person. This is insane.
I think the whole world saw how unnormal he is when we saw him write Get Back out of nothing.
No, but it's fine that he's not normal. Embrace being a freak. Paul, you're an X-Man. It's like, there's a guy who's got claws, a guy who shoots lasers, and I just write really good songs, But, he's just like the X-Man that doesn't fight Magneto is all, And
he likes to take the bus and be an ordinary dude. Yes, he does, but he's not. So that camera thing, is that why at the beginning of this track, he says, this tune's called How I'd Fix Your Camera?
Right, yeah.
Okay, because I heard that and I was like, okay, so he's still being really weird about the Beatles. Like he can't play it without saying something strange. But no, that was an actual reference that on this record, we don't have the reference for. So that makes a lot of sense.
And then at the end, he's like, and other facial expressions, which felt very much like John in Get Back doing, ladies and gentlemen, the Bottles or the Rolling Stones. Like it had that, these guys have a similar sense of humor. You could definitely hear that just by piecing all these little things together. I like with the next track, Country Dreamer, that they leave in a bunch of the false starts. Again, I'm a sucker for a false start. And hearing Paul mess up Country Dreamer a couple of times as someone who can barely even play bar chords is a wonderfully humbling and a gratifying experience.
And then he goes into a couple of Buddy Holly tributes. Wait, no, sorry. There's one in between.
No, Erica, he does the thing that he does to every person who joins his band. So when you make a deal with the devil, it's very Faustian, you need to give something back, you need to sacrifice something. And imagine you are a talented young guitarist. If you join Paul McCartney's band, you are going to have to play dun, And you're going to have to play for 3 minutes and pretend like you are not completely bored by it. And Paul is going to enjoy himself and love it. And so, this is the song. We know it's the song that got you into the Beatles, Paul. It's fine. You don't have to tell us.
She's just cycling through it, because it's like the John and Paul song. So now it's going to be the Paul and, Brian Ray song. It's like, impress me, like do it.
No, but I don't think any guitarist is proud of the songs they can recall at a moment's notice. Like, I don't think this day screams pre-prepared. I think this is a lot of, Paul, I've got a bit of reel left in the film. Come in the backyard. Let's just do something. And Paul's like, right, what do I know the chords for? What can I pick? And what do I know the lyrics for 100%? I mean, in I'm Gonna Love You Too, as someone who has very poorly performed I'm Gonna Love You Too and open mic night every other week, he gets the lyrics completely wrong and he still goes for it, and it shows his skill as a performer. Weirdly, with the other songs, he does the big no-no, which is stopping and restarting again. They typically are meant to kind of plow through, but he only does that with the Buddy Holly stuff. So I think that shows his love for Buddy there. We get Peggy Sue and I'm Gonna Love You Too.
Yeah, I love this trio of songs. Maybe I'm in the minority here, but I always love hearing him do 20 Flight Rock, do a little bit of Eddie Cochran. Like I don't know. I love it. I'm a sucker for it. I still think back to him doing it at the Cavern Club in 99, on the Cavern Club DVD. And it's like so much fun. And I love it when he does it live. I'm here for it. It's probably the only song from that sort of like set that he does, that mini set in his shows, that I can tolerate. The rest I think is pretty intolerable, but I love when he does 20 Flight Rock. So it was fun to hear it here too. It's always fun for me to hear it.
To me, he always has a little extra bit of swagger, even for Paul, because there's this is what made the Beatles happen.
He's got to impress John. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like there's always a bit of that 15-year-old boy showing off that he knows all the words and all the chords.
As beautifully done in Nowhere Boy. Thank you very much.
Your favorite movie
ever.
Yes. And I'm a massive, massive Buddy Holly fan. So I loved hearing him do Peggy Sue and I'm Gonna Love You Too. I almost wonder, Sam, because you mentioned like in these backyard tapes, he does some Elvis stuff, but I've got to wonder if those got left off and the Buddy Holly stuff got left in because somebody owns the publishing rights to Buddy Holly.
Oh, I didn't even, yeah.
I sort of think that.
Also, Paul in a few years would go on to produce Denny Laine's Buddy Holly album. So hearing him do this version, a little bit of a letdown, but I know that he can produce a much better version of the song as well. Paul is steeped in Buddy at this point.
Yeah.
He's very adorable when he goes into his little Buddy Holly affectations. It's so cute.
Yeah. I love that. He's such a Buddy Holly dork, and that's like one of my favorite things about Paul.
He's just such a dork.
He's the coolest dork. He's the coolest dork there is.
He is the coolest dork.
Have you seen my Bill Black bass? It's bass from Bill Black.
Oh my God. He loves showing off that Bill Black bass.
We went to the Paul McCartney exhibit at Brooklyn Museum a couple of weeks ago, and the best picture, it's the when they start in color in like the 65 pictures, and there's that picture where he's like just caught a fish, or somebody near him has caught a fish, and he's got this look on his face like, and he's so funny. And like, that's my favorite Paul picture because it shows what a total dork he is.
That's so funny.
Just how unabashedly that is who Paul is. It was so cute. We end this on a nice dorky note with his tribute to Buddy Holly, and that is the end of One Hand Clapping.
That was awesome. Now I want to just go re-listen to it because it's so good. And listening to you two nerd out over Paul, I've learned a lot. I consider myself something of a Paul aficionado, but I definitely cede that to you guys. So I'm glad, Sam, I'm especially glad you got to join us today. So nice having you on the show.
Pleasure's been all mine. Like I said earlier, what the show needed was more straight white men explaining the Beatles and how it should be done.
We've always felt that way.
What the world needs is more straight white men explaining the Beatles.
Yes.
When I saw Mark Lewisohn being questioned, my world was thrown upside down. But hey, at least I got to talk about an incredible upcoming, a new album, new Paul McCartney, so technically with new Paul McCartney material on it. This has been an absolutely wonderful conversation. I feel like my life is so lacking in deep dive Paul McCartney chat, and I have had that particular itch scratched. It's been everything that I wanted it to be. I remember in the Joker movie when he gets onto the set of that talk show that he's been obsessing with, and he's like, it's everything I imagined it would be. And I've gotten that here today without pulling out a revolver as well. No pun intended.
That's good. I'm glad that it didn't end the same way as Joker did.
We've had a great time, and your podcast is always where I go when I want my deep cut Paul fix. Nobody deep dives on Paul like you do.
Oh, you kid.
True.
No, it's horrible.
It's fantastic. And for the members of our audience who don't follow you, where can they get your podcast? Where can they follow your goings on?
So you can find me by typing in Paul McCartney Podcast or Paul or Nothing onto any of the major podcasting networks or streaming platforms. I've had a bit of a hiatus recently, but I've recently come back swinging with a interview with Roy Kurt, aka Freelance Hellraiser, the DJ who created the Twin Freaks album with Paul. I've got interviews with Steve Matteo and Luca Perez coming out about their books. And then I'm doing a 3-part series on Wingspan coming up. And then I'll be moving on to Chaos and Creation in the Backyard. I've been doing this for well over 5 years now, and I'm still not done with Paul. I haven't even tackled the classical stuff yet. There's plenty of McCartney yet to cover, and I'm excited to do it at Paul or Nothing. I'm sure I'll have you both on in some MIB capacity in the future at some point for corporate merging and cross promotion. I cannot wait.
I can't either. And if you need somebody to geek out with on Chaos and Creation, I'm so there.
The wheels are in motion now, folks. That cannot be undone. Let's see what happens.
All right. That
Fantastic.
sounds good. Well, thank you again. This was so much fun.
Yes, thank you. And thank you to our listeners for listening to BC the Beatles. And as always, subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you're listening right now. And please give us a rating/review so other Beatlemaniacs can find us.
And follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter/X, and TikTok. We'll be posting photos and more from this episode and beyond. And remember, you can always email us at bcthebeatles@gmail.com too. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.